More Like Home by Like to Laugh on ch30, Chapter 30. I can feel you there, Phantom, Tim said without looking up, dressed in full Red Robin gear. You chill the air around you for about 1.5 feet in all directions except below you where it's at least 6 foot. Right. Cold air falls. Good to know, Danny said honestly, letting himself fade back into visibility. Is this the missing person case? Tim grunted, scanning his laptop screen with a deep furrow in his brow. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's another branch of this one metahuman trafficking ring that keeps coming back. They love to get their claws into Gotham. We have a lot of metas here. His eyes were dark. Doesn't Batman... He hesitated, realizing he never checked the exact nuances of the no metas in Gotham rule. Tim caught on before he figured out how to finish. It's not a rule, he corrected, glancing up. Batman discourages metas from living in Gotham because there's so many mass hysteria events, and those are more dangerous with metas around. They come to Gotham anyways because the meta hiring rates are good, which is because metas on average are better able to defend themselves and so higher retention rates. Danny blinked, filing all of that away. That makes sense. Thanks. What are you looking at now? Tim paused for a moment, glancing up at him again, then answered. This particular group tends to use a rotating variety of business fronts to draw people in. Hiring agencies, halfway houses, some legal consultation offices, or cheap motels. I'm looking into any business that opened up 5 to 8 months ago. Disappearances had been happening for 4. 16 people in 4 months in one city district. All metas. All left their jobs without notice and went nowhere. All with the same message left to friends and family. Danny's core hummed, something between a purr and a growl. It wasn't tight like it had been when he first left Amity, but it yawned in protest of his recent inactivity. It was starting to get harder to ignore. He rubbed his chest with his knuckles. You know B will actually kill you if you starve yourself again, right? Tim said, eyes on the laptop screen, still scanning reports. Danny squawked in indignation. I'm not, he protested. I'm just curious. He resisted the urge to flatten his hand over his chest and pulled it away, crossing his arms over the back of the couch. Without thinking, he sat down until his arms shielded him. Tim hummed, unimpressed but continued. I've identified a couple of locations that are worth staking out. I might ask Signal to give them a pass too, but they don't always look suspicious from the outside, even to him. Danny nodded. By now, Bruce had gone over the mechanics of human trafficking with him. Most trafficking victims were chained by blackmail, not metal. Is there anything I can do to help? Yeah, go tell B you're having weird ghost needs again. And just so you know, you touch your chest when your core acts up. Danny blushed, his face going cold as ectoplasm rushed to it, and took off without responding. Bruce was in his study today, Cass sitting behind the desk with him as they debated an array of ballet shoes, foot wraps, and sign language. Both of them looked up as he pushed the door open. Bruce gave him a broad, cheerful smile. A Brucey smile. Right, they were still supposed to be working on his acting. And Phantom wasn't Bruce's ward. So Danny couldn't... Yeah, he could wait. Danny straightened up and smiled, waving sheepishly as he darted for the grandfather clock. Just passing through. Danny. Bruce and Cass spoke in unison, and Danny winced, stopping just short of the clock as he debated what to do. Did you need something? Bruce asked in his normal voice, not the boisterous Brucey one. Danny looked over his shoulder. Bruce looked serious, brow furrowed slightly, and Cass straightened up to meet his eyes with a quizzical look. If Bruce had broken character, then it was possibly fine for him to do it too. Can I start going on patrol soon? Bruce's eyes narrowed slightly, dropping to Danny's chest. Danny pressed a fist over it self-consciously, and his throat closed before he could elaborate. Weird ghost needs. Tim hadn't meant anything by it, but Bruce studied him for a moment, and then sighed. I anticipated that some leeway might be necessary, he said. Very well. You may accompany me on patrols as long as you remain invisible and do not interfere. You may not step in until your training is complete. Well, that wasn't going to work at all. Danny studied Bruce for a moment, but he seemed dead serious. Okay, Danny said reluctantly. Cass studied him for a long, lingering moment that said she didn't buy it. It was possible that Bruce caught it too, but neither of them commented, and Danny tried to force himself to relax. Bruce's territory, Bruce's rules. As best as Danny could manage it, anyway. He might be more comfortable here than he was a month ago, but he was still wary of pushing too hard. What would Bruce do if Danny pushed him too hard? He didn't know, and he was too nervous to find out. Tonight? He asked, hopeful despite the chafe of the response. Bruce studied him for a moment, then nodded, and Danny straightened up, a smile appearing on his face. Danny Phantom was back in the game. As usual, even in the middle of another investigation, Tim completed his research swiftly and had the results in Bruce's email by the next evening. Bruce opened the first file and began reading through, and didn't stop for nearly 3 hours, not breaking for dinner, and only eating mechanically the food that Alfred brought afterward. Once he gotten through the entire set of attachments, only a fraction of the GIW's crimes, he called Clark. Bruce, is something the matter? How is your article on the anti-ecto acts progressing? Bruce asked. Is everything okay? Lois asked in the background. Not sure, Clark mumbled back, slightly muffled. I'm going to talk to him on the roof. I'll wash the dishes when I get back, I promise. You better. There was a brief pause, and finally Clark responded. It's only about a third way through. I interviewed some Amity Park townsfolk, and those have been written up, and I spoke to Sidney Poindexter as well. He seems like a good kid, but I want to build the article around ghost interviews, so I'm waiting on Danny to help me talk to a few more. Bruce grunted in acknowledgement. He's struggling with the material, he informed Clark. Having reviewed some of the book himself, Bruce certainly understood why. It may take him a few more weeks. He paused, slightly debating on how much to say, and then concluded. Lois may be interested in doing a follow-up article on GIW itself. Their crimes are more serious than I originally realized. Clark knew him for far too well not to catch the subtext. What did you find out? Their plans for Phantom are extensive, Bruce said. He stood up to pace, feeling unpleasantly restless. Their files contain, among other things, blueprints for a combination lab and prison cell, a containment plan that included a directive to apply electricity if he attempts to communicate, and a step-by-step vivisection procedure. It was some of the most horrendous documentation Bruce had ever had the misfortune reviewing. If Danny had seen even a fraction of these files, and Bruce suspected that he had, given that one of his friends was a skilled hacker, then it would fully explain his reaction at any mention of the GIW. Bruce. Clark trailed off for a moment, considering his approach. What are you going to do then? Bruce hesitated. Among other things, he said, stiffer than he intended. I'm going to instruct him to call you if necessary. It wasn't something he did lightly. As a rule, Bruce rescued his own children. They turned to him for help, and he went to them as quickly as he could, no matter how far they had gone. All of them knew, of course, and they could call for Clark, but in practice they rarely did. But Bruce had been too late too many times before, and it was clear that this was not something he could afford to be late for. An hour late, and the GIW could be flaring Danny in layers. 3 hours late, they could be breaking open his rib cage. 6, and they could be slicing his organs into neat sections for examination. And all by indications he would most likely be alive and conscious for the experience. Fortunately, Clark treated that statement with the gravity it deserves. "I'll keep an ear out," he promised Bruce seriously. "I can take a few months off-planet missions if you're worried." Even Clark couldn't hear cries for help when he was off-planet, a major contributing factor in Jason's death. Bruce genuinely considered that for a moment, then shook his head. "No. Perhaps the GIW is in Gotham. For the moment, they don't even know Phantom is here." Though that would change once Phantom started regularly going out on patrol. It rarely took more than a few weeks for word of the new bats to get around. "All right," Clark agreed easily. "Anything else?" "Several things. The rest of the bats would have to be quietly notified of the risk as well. They would need to figure out the extent of Danny's vulnerability to trackers, and possibly construct a safe room in the bat cave in the event that he needed to lay low. He would need to discuss possible countermeasures for extreme heat. But for Clark, speak to Lois about doing an article on the GIW. I'll have Tim or Babs email her with some documents when our current investigation concludes. But she will do some investigation as well. Duke tells me that Danny has indicated that the GIW was rather brazen in its treatment of humans as well." "I'll talk to her about it," Clark promised. "And thanks for talking to me about this." Bruce huffed quietly. Clark was painfully earnest about as ever. "I appreciate your help." Everyone on the Bat-Kid chat was quick to complain about Danny getting to head out on patrol early. Apparently, all of them had gone through at least 6 months of training before Bruce had let them out on the streets. Even Duke, who, like Danny, had previous experience. Despite the teasing, though, they didn't really seem bothered. To Danny's disappointment, Bruce didn't head out on patrol right away. Instead, he led Danny to the Batmobile and started it up. "Commissioner Gordon is expecting us," Bruce explained, gravelly and curt. "And put your seatbelt on." Apparently, being virtually immune to car crashes was not good enough reason not to buckle up. Danny repressed the urge to roll his eyes, and obeyed. "What for?" Bruce glanced up in the rearview mirror. "You." Danny blinked, startled, and then scratched his neck with a sheepish smile. It was only about 15 minutes to the police station, during which Danny noticed most cars in Gotham pulled over for the Batmobile like it was an ambulance. Danny was used to that with the GAV, but he suspected here it was out of respect rather than fear of Bruce's driving skills. He phased through the side when they stopped and waited for Bruce. Bruce gave him a nod and then silently indicated a second-story window before he turned away and shot off his grapple. Danny had expected Bruce to leave out most of the bat supplies that Danny was unlikely to need. He hadn't. Secretly, Danny was kind of looking forward to learning how to use a grappling hook. It would come in handy if he was depowered, sure, but it also just seemed like fun. For now, Danny followed Bruce effortlessly through to the second story, and Bruce slid open the unlocked window and slipped and slid. Commissioner Gordon was at his desk, papers spread across it, and a deep frown on his face. Danny squinted. Was that a conspiracy board behind him? Bruce waited silently in the corner of the room. Danny fidgeted. After another minute, Commissioner Gordon picked up his coffee, glanced up, and only jumped a little. He set the mug back down without drinking. Batman, I'm guessing you have something for me? Bruce grunted, crossing the room to pull a file out from under his cape, drop it on the commissioner's desk. Danny recognized it. Bruce had been working on it for a few days now. A detailed financial record tracking money of illegal arms shipments, indicating a long line of people. He planted a handful of marked bills to get it started. Gordon nodded. But if it was just that, you would have left it on my desk. You've got a new nestling, don't you? Bruce grunted in affirmation, and Danny took the cue to appear next to him, giving Commissioner Gordon a cheerful wave as he perched in midair, our legs crossed. Gordon's eyebrows flew up, and Danny wondered if he had the idea of Bruce's secret identity. It would make sense. Then he knew Bruce had taken a new recruit, but it wasn't expecting Danny to look so obviously different. Then Gordon did something worse. Isn't that Phantom? He asked, with an unmistakable worry edge. That's new. Controversial meta from the Fenton case? Danny locked down the urge to turn invisible and bolt into Bruce's cape. Fearless, defiant, playful. His smile came out rather strained. Good to know they're still making sure I get a warm welcome wherever I go. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Bruce grunted again, this time in disapproval. Their hatred for Phantom is unfounded. He's with me. His tone brooked no arguments, and Gordon apparently trusted him enough that he relaxed again, eyeing Danny with more concentration. Danny smiled brightly, hiding his nerves. Phantom, smiling only draws attention to the fact that you're obviously upset. Whoops. Danny quickly reassessed his options, then drew his knees up and kicked lightly in the air in boredom, letting his smile fall from his face. Bruce was right. Boredom was easier to hide behind than cheer. Also, Bruce knew that Gordon was aware of their identities, even if they both seemed unwilling to address it directly. Good to know. Reminds me of your first Robin when he was starting out, Gordon remarked offhandedly, and then to Bruce, anything else I should know? If the Justice League is unable to repeal the Anti-Ecto Acts before Phantom's presence here is common knowledge, you'll receive orders from a government agency to detain Phantom for reasons they may not disclose. He fixed Gordon with a steely look. No matter what they say, Phantom is a thinking, feeling child they wish to experiment on. Boredom. Look bored. Eyes down. Shoulders curved. Fidgeting. No expression. He had practice at this, too, listening to his parents gush about their weapons. Pause. Phantom, Bruce said, with a faint edge of exasperation. Danny glanced up, eyebrows raised. It is still appropriate for you to look upset about things you have known reason to be upset about. Damn it. He just wasn't good at this. Danny closed his eyes briefly, blew out a long and shaky breath, then nodded, allowing himself to curl down a little more. Sorry, Bruce grunted, returning his gaze to Gordon. Oracle will inform me if an unavoidable situation arises, but Phantom is not to come to harm. Gordon raised his hands and marked surrender. I know how you are about your nestlings, Batman. You know I wouldn't hurt them. I've been meeting them since your first Robin was just a tyke. Bruce let out a short, sharp puff of his own, then nodded stiffly. One shot in his direction, and the officer will be investigated to their root. Danny's gaze lingered on Bruce, an odd fluttering in his chest, betraying more than gratitude than he really knew how to contain. When was the last time someone had been so protective of him? Really, him. I understand, Batman, Gordon said quietly, more with empathy than Bruce would prefer. Once word starts getting out around him, I'll make sure that's clear to my men. What would you like me to tell them? That Phantom is one of ours now, Bruce said, firmly and certain. After that, it was on patrol. In a way, it wasn't that different from what Danny was used to. He had to keep a close eye on the street, and Bruce would pause before he jumped in, allowing Danny a couple of seconds to identify the situation. If he didn't figure it out in time, Bruce would point it out to him, explaining in a sentence or two how he knew something was wrong. Batman paused, and then, this time, Danny's sharp eyes picked out the problem easily. Ambush, he muttered, too quietly to carry on the wind. There's 5 men watching that guy head down the street. Eye contact was dangerous on the streets of Gotham, especially at night. Gang-related. Too large a group not to be. But their target isn't armed, so he's not directly involved. His hands were clearly visible, not on a weapon hilt, and there wasn't any odd bulges. Bruce nodded once, then hopped silently closer to the ambush site. There, he deliberately placed himself underneath a streetlight, casting a shadow of himself across the street. Half the men swore loudly, and then they scattered, not bothering to keep up the ruse. The target froze, eyes wide. They would have been too deep in the shadow for most people to notice them. There's no major gang activity at the moment, Bruce informed Danny tersely, watching the man hastily dial a number and then start talking loudly into his phone. A discreet way of signaling that he'd been missed immediately. So this is likely personal. We won't get involved. Okay, Danny murmured, watching the man with concern as he took off at a much brisker walk. He didn't like it, but he understood. Resolving petty disputes wasn't worth the time it would take to interview the targets, track down all the people involved, and step in. Bruce moved on, grappling smoothly across the rooftops and began towering buildings. Danny looked down, watching the streets flash by, and missed Amity Park with a sudden ache. Core strained, or heartache, it didn't really make a difference. Danny just missed the low rooftops, the wide roads of Amity, and it was a shit for hiding. It would have been so much easier to lose ghost hunters in Gotham, but it made it easier to keep watch over a city. Bruce didn't pause before his next diversion, and it was immediately obvious why. They caught a group of 3 mid-mugging, a man and a woman holding the third man still between them, while a 4th party menacing him with a gun, holding a card in his offhand, demanding a PIN number. Without missing a beat, Bruce threw a batarang at the man's hand, and the man cursed, dropping the gun, diffusing the most immediate danger, and cocked and aimed gun would be discharged by accident if the one holding it was startled. Bruce jumped from the high roof to a lower one, then slid down the awning and threw himself into the fray, while the muggers, who still looked up in shock. Bruce's experience and training showed through in equal parts. Danny thought it was like watching his mom in a serious fight. Years of competitive fighting coming together in an operation that looked almost choreographed. Batman was better, obviously, with more experience and greater arsenal of techniques to choose from. But there was still a similarity was striking, and made him homesick again. The victim took the opportunity to bolt, while one of the muggers dove for the gun. Danny itched to intervene. The gun was right there, still within easy reach, but he held himself back, just watching, his core pulled tight at the tension. One of the muggers lunged for the gun. Without missing a beat, Bruce stomped on his hand and kicked the gun away, and it spun down the street out of easy reach. Danny let out a breath he'd been holding, but still remained tense until Bruce knocked out the man with a blow of his elbow, while the woman bolted. Danny's core purred in silent satisfaction. All threats subdued, no major injuries, one victim safe. Perfect. He relaxed. Bruce paused, checking over the scene for anything he missed, and then, without a word, he grappled back onto the roof to resume patrol. Danny fell back in a few feet away, nearly beaming. "So, how's Baby Spook doing on patrol?" Dick asked for the third time, managing to sound cheerful even as obvious sounds of flight came through from his end. Bruce didn't bother scolding him for the distraction. Danny lifted his head and opened the line. Luckily, all his equipment had transferred into his ghost side seamlessly, and the comm system had been ghost-proofed weeks ago. "Pretty okay. I like being able to apply what I've learned so far, and wish I could fight half as well as B does." "Just give it 30 years of practice," Tim deadpanned. "You'll be old. You'll have as much experience as he does." Danny snorted softly, and Bruce let out a put-on sigh. "In regards to your combat skills, you are ready for patrol now," Damien informed him tartly. "You simply need to improve your understanding of investigation and coordination." Danny's core buzzed in frustration. It took more effort this time to brush it off. "It's nearly 1 a.m, Bruce broke in gruffly. "Phantom and I are going to keep watch on the moving company front. Spoiler, you have the area covered." "Of course I do. Well, who do you think I am?" They diverted course again, towards the moving company that had opened up just a few months ago. Tim and Bruce were both certain it was a cover for something, although it wasn't clear whether it was arms dealers or the traffickers. Bruce thought it was the former, since the building wasn't equipped to house people inconspicuously, while Tim was monitoring a nearby by-the-hour motel that he said looked promising. Phantom's too young to see what goes on in those anyway. "Hey!" Bruce settled them at a good and high angle and settled in to watch. A large window that would have provided a peek into the building, but it had been broken, with a cardboard tape over it. Not super unusual in this part of town. From what Danny could see even from here, it wasn't Crime Alley, but it wasn't good. "You're taking well to the more complicated and technical nature of ordinary crime," Bruce said after a moment, low and natural. "And your observation skills are improving at a reasonable rate. Robin is correct. You'll likely be ready to help sooner than expected." Danny brightened at the thought, smiling despite himself. "Thanks." A truck pulled in, and Danny made a mental note of the license plate, but the boxes being transferred seemed innocuous enough. Maybe too much so. There shouldn't be branding there. Bruce's displeasure grunted, said he'd agreed. They watched the people move back and forth for a while, and then the movement inside. An awful lot of activity for so late at night. "Stay here," Bruce muttered at last, then jumped down to disappear into the building, planting bugs. Danny thought maybe poking around for anything he could to examine later. His grip on the rooftop wall was tight, but he didn't follow. A short while later, Bruce returned without comment, and they went back to watching the comings and goings. Danny spaced off for a few minutes. Admittedly, stakes out wasn't something he really did in Amity Park, since ghosts attacked almost exclusively by impulse. He didn't have time to spy on Vlad, and his parents were always pretty open about what they were doing. But he and Bruce had gone over what to watch for, So he kept track of descriptions, mentally recited license plates to himself as the hours stretched on. It was definitely a smuggling operation of some kind, but Danny couldn't tell what without actually looking into the boxes they were moving around. They bugged up when it passed 3 in the morning, and Bruce nodded in Danny's direction before getting to his feet and taking off towards where they had left in the Batmobile, almost 10 blocks away. Danny stretched with a yawn, still not used to these kinds of late nights anymore. Heck, even as an active hero, he mostly woke up, fought, and then went back to sleep. "What did you notice?" Bruce prompted when they settled back in, and Danny finally returned to visibility. Danny leaned sideways against the back of the seat and resisted the urge to fall asleep, his core humming in contentment. "Behavior doesn't match with a real moving company," he said at last. "There's no reason for them to be working overnight, and they shouldn't have been offloading anything at an office building. They honestly shouldn't have anything to offload. One of the cars looked like it had its license plate changed out recently, and there was some wear around them. Looks like the whole thing was dropping off, not like a meeting." Bruce nodded shortly. "Good. Yes. It appears the goods were being dropped off for distribution. I was able to plant a bug in the main office and have a good look at the storage facilities. There were various innocuous goods, but most of them were unsuitable for a moving company. There were also supplies of restricted ammunition, as expected. Oracle will track the license plates and identify a few more locations to scout out." Danny suppressed a yawn. "Okay, sound good. You gotta let me go in next time." There was almost a definite no. Danny tried to suppress his disappointment and shook himself, trying to stay awake long enough for them to get back.